The project that we're working on in Oman is the repatriation and support of about 200 Sierra Leonean domestic workers. My name is Sari Heidenreich, and I'm the Director of Programs for Oman and Kuwait with Do Bold. Most of these women are in their 20s or early 30s. Many of them are mothers. Almost all of them are supporting family back home. These are women who came to Oman in search of economic opportunities, although some of them were tricked and told that they would be coming for education or more career-focused roles.
About my story, I am a graduate from nursing. I live with my father, who is a handicap, and my one daughter. This man met me and told me that they need nurses in Oman. So I come here to work as a nurse, not something like that. I am in the house working for family.
My name is Ekaterina Porras-Ivolobova, and I am the founder and director of Do Bold. So when we started working in the Gulf, we focus on advocacy, advocating for the promotion and protection of the rights of migrant workers, particularly at that time domestic workers. And we also worked on empowerment, empowering domestic workers to know their rights and also what to do with these rights.
The man told me that when I come here, I will work in a hospital, not knowing that I am coming to work as a housemaid. So this is my story, and I want to go home because my father is in critical condition. Ma, please, ma.
Hearing their stories and what they've gone through, working 12 to 18 hours a day, not having a day off in months, not being given a salary, not being given medical attention for injuries that they endured on the job. This is the face of forced labor and human trafficking.
I was suffering in Sierra Leone too much. Things are hard for me, even to have food. And then I decided to come in Oman and work. But I did not know that when I come in Oman, this is the kind of work I am coming to do. They are treating me like a slave. They turned me into a slave. Yes, they said I am a slave. I'm a slave. They beat me, tormenting me, pressuring my life, starving me without no food. They beat me and then lock me up inside room for 1 week without no food, no water. Only God helped me.
These women have found Do Bold often through each other, through the connections in there, and we've brought them into communication with each other and part of a larger community through social media. So often, the most common request we have and why we're doing this campaign is that they want to go home. And they want to go home and rest and get medical attention.
This place is just like a hell for me. All what my dream, all what they told me, I don't see nothing like that. I don't see any bits of that. I'm working without day off, without rest, without week off. I'm just working.
Another barrier is that often women haven't finished their contracts, but the work situations that they've found themselves in are too difficult for them to continue. And so there needs to be work with the employer to discuss how this woman can be let out of her contract and go home sooner than expected.
Later, I decided to run away. And now I am in the streets without no shelter. I am suffering outside. I'm really suffering, madam. And then I don't have my passport, my ID card, and the police are chasing me. They are after me. They said if they saw me, they will take me to jail for 2 years. They will take me to jail for 2 years.
Leaving Oman is really hard for these women for a number of reasons. One of the main ones is economics. Often they haven't been paid for a long time, or they've only received part of their salary. And unfortunately, the Sierra Leonean embassy doesn't have the budget to repatriate such a large number of workers. Over the past year, we've seen that the COVID-19 pandemic has created huge economic challenges all around the world. And nonprofit organizations and paragovernment organizations are not exempt from that. We turn to crowdfunding because it's what's needed, but also because it's a beautiful way to connect human beings with other human beings. These women often feel isolated. They're working in homes with little connection to the outside world. Sometimes they feel like the world has forgotten them. And so what a powerful message for us to be able to send them, that hundreds of people around the world are contributing to them going home. And so when you give to this project, you're not just giving to an organization, you're giving directly to a woman whose life will be changed because they can go home. You can be a part of that story. You can be a part of the story of a woman going home and being able to rest and recover from all that she's endured.
Yeah, Sister Catherine, my situation is not good. I am not feeling right. I don't have time to sleep. I wake up 5 o'clock to work with them. I even work for 2 hours. And also they leave me at 12 o'clock at night. I don't have time to rest. My head is torn. I feel my head. So I tell them to take me to hospital. They said I don't sick. I don't want to work. That's why I said I sick. I said no. I said, you know, I am hardworking. I work, but I am sick now. And the woman said, if I don't work, I will die in Oman here. He threatened me. Even now, life is not really easy for me for now. That's the problem, Mrs. Catherine. Please help me. Please help me.
Hi everyone, my name is Fatima Kamara. I'm from Sierra Leone. I came in Oman just to keep my dream forward, but unfortunately it go wrong. It's what I think is not what I see. I'm really suffering in Oman. The family I work with is very big. I have 8 rooms and 9 bathrooms, 1 kitchen. I wake up at 5 in the morning. I sleep at 12 in the midnight. Now it's very cold for me. I wash pan outside. Even if I complain that I'm sick, they will just give me only Panadol, no good medication. I cry. I said I want to go home. They said they don't have ticket money for me. On one day I sit down, I said I'm not able to work because I'm sick. All of them come and beat me up. I did not have option. I started working again. Working without salary. So though please, we need your help to go home back. I came here for my dream, to push my dream forward, but it not work. So do please, in the name of God, we really need your help, because this is not my dream and this is not what I think for in future. I have my daughters. I want to sponsor them as a mother, but unfortunately I'm not able. It not work for me. I work too much. The only thing I'm asked now for, please, in the name of God, we really need you people's help just to take us home. If I did not carry my dream in my home, let me carry my life back in my home. That's what I want now. Please, in the name of God, this is my only help. This is what I'm asking for. We are asking for, because it's not only me. Others are outside. So do please, in the name of God, we need you people's help to send us home back.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. We wanted to start that way today because we want to be grounded today in what we say in the stories of our sisters who are in Oman. We're going to talk about percentages and data, but we must remember that each percentage, each survey is somebody's real life and real story. and that these are situations that many of these women are still in now as we speak to this day. We're messaging them just earlier today, letting them know that we're sharing their stories with all of you. And so we thank you for being here and for listening and for supporting our sisters with your presence. Just before we proceed, I want to let you know that we are recording this session. My name is Sari Heidenreich, and I'm the Director of Programs for Do Bold in Oman and Kuwait. And I am joined today by 3 other wonderful and powerful women. We have Ekaterina Porras-Sivalabova, who is the founder and director of Do Bold. We have Sister Miriam Fulla, who is the Trafficking and Persons Prevention Manager with World Hope International in Sierra Leone. And we have Ruma Kalush, who's the editor of migrantrights.org. Thank you all for being here with us. Over the next hour or so, we're going to tell you a bit about the Freedom for Our Sisters project, which is the broader project that this research is a part of. We didn't set out to do research, and you'll hear a little bit more about that story. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the findings and also our recommendations on how to address these issues. Then we'll hand it to Sister Miriam and Rima, who are going to speak about the relevance of the report, both in Sierra Leone and in the Gulf. And then when we finish with the presentation portion, we're going to talk about how each of us can get involved. And then we're going to turn to questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box down there at the bottom. Put them in while we're still speaking, because we will talk less if we know what your questions are, and we'll get to your questions sooner. So go ahead and start putting those in as they come up for you, so we know what your questions are. And regardless, we're going to leave a lot of time for questions at the end. So we will have plenty of time to have a conversation among the group that's gathered here today. And in that vein as well, if you're here, it means you care about this issue, and maybe there are other people who are on this call as well who would be great for you to know. So we welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat if you're comfortable. You can share who you are, your website or your LinkedIn if you like, but see this as an opportunity as well to get connected to some other like-minded people. And I'm going to hand it over now to Ekaterina just to introduce us briefly to the work of Do Bold, which is who is hosting this presentation today and who is releasing the report.
Thank you, Sari. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here and being interested in what is happening in Oman and our efforts. To begin with, I want to make sure that everybody knows that the report is not the end of a project by any means. We have been doing this project for the last 2 years, but the report is just an interim step. So just for you to know that we continue working with all Sierra Leoneans in Oman. So having said this, I just want to briefly introduce you a little bit about Do Bold. We have been in the Gulf since 2013. We were first established in Kuwait, but now we are actively working also in Saudi, in Oman, and in the UAE. And we started with advocacy projects, but we have moved on to work a lot with data. And data because we know how powerful it can be, and we know the lack of it that it exists, especially in the Gulf countries. So we wanted to make sure that we gather data so we can understand what are the problems and whether these are widespread in order to find the solution. So we first need to make sure that to prove that there is a problem, so make sure that there are the solutions. So Freedom for Our Sisters that Sari is going to talk about is one of the projects that we are using data, but it's not the only one. We have 3 other projects that we are also using data. And now Sari will introduce you to Freedom for Our Sisters.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Katerina. So as Ekaterina mentioned, this report is part of the broader Freedom for Our Sisters project. And so I want to give you a little overview of what that is. And I'm going to do that by sharing a story with you. I want to share with you the story of Hawa. Hawa went to Oman looking for a way to support her family in Sierra Leone to survive. And she borrowed $1,000 to pay a recruiter who told her that she would work in a supermarket for 6 months and make $450 a month. When she arrived, Hawa was instead taken straight to a home where her passport was confiscated and she was told she would be a live-in domestic worker for 2 years. After that, she told us she cried for 4 days straight. She cleaned, cooked, washed dishes, ironed clothes, took care of a young child and 2 elderly women from 5:30 in the morning until 11:45 at night, with only one 30-minute break. That's more than 18 hours a day. She also had no day off. She worked every single day. I was called a slave, she told me, and told I should work like a slave. They didn't provide her with a room of her own, periodically searched her belongings, took away her phone, and disconnected her from the Wi-Fi. The employers didn't provide her with adequate food, and when she was feeling unwell, she couldn't take time off to see a doctor. She began to lose weight, and she developed a rash, which she had to treat herself with a natural remedy of lime and salt. After a month, Hawa finally got her salary, but it was only $180, just 40% of what her recruiter had promised. When she complained to the employment office in Oman, they told her to stay with her employer, and that if she came to them for help, they would lock her in a room without food. After 6.5 months, Hawa felt she could bear it no longer and decided to leave her employer, which made her a criminal under Omani law. Several months later, the government of Oman opened an amnesty period to allow workers who had left their employers to leave the country. Hawa was eager to register, but she couldn't because she didn't qualify. Now, her only remaining option is to get her former employer's permission to leave the country, which is something that she nor we have been able to do until this day. So in short, she is trapped. So this is Hawa's story, but she is not alone. She is one of more than 650 Sierra Leonean women in Oman who have had similar experiences. Through our research and support, we found that Hawa's experience is the norm, from the passport confiscation to the working hours and wage theft. And while Hawa experienced racist verbal abuse, we found both physical and sexual abuse to be common as well. Additionally, employers rarely allow workers to step outside of their homes and sometimes lock them inside a room or a bathroom as a form of punishment. Dubold originally got involved in Oman in October of 2020 after a Sierra Leonean reached out seeking support for a group of women who wanted to return home. When we started working with this group, we had no idea the scope of the problem or how big the community would become. There's more than 600 women in our online community today. And that was our first step to start building community with this woman, a place where our sisters could share their struggles and be each other's support. In that space is where the research really started. We started to understand the breadth and depth of the problem. And we started researching in order to provide support. We needed to understand what the issues were, what people were facing now in order to know how to best serve them. We did work with them on empowering them to know their rights, negotiating with employers. We were able to repatriate over 100 women, help them register for amnesty, support people who were detained in prison, and other practical support like providing food. So the report, as Ekaterina said, is really the next step in this journey that we have been on with our sisters to find freedom, to find rest, and to find safety. And we're so grateful to be able to be bringing these findings to you today. And we're grateful that the report was released yesterday, so we have already had some media coverage in The Guardian. Ekaterina was on Sierra Leonean national TV this morning with the Minister of Labor. So we're very grateful also for all the media outlets out there and the individuals out there who are helping get the word out about our sister situation in Oman. Ekaterina, can I hand it over to you now just to talk a little bit more about the report itself and specifically the methodology? How did we get this information?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Seri. So now you know that the report is based on a project that we started. When we started, it was not our intentions to do a research, but just because of how we engage with the community, it was an opportunity for us not only to collect the data, but actually to have this publicly. It came at one point that the data was so big that we needed to share it, and that's how the report came about, because we needed to make sure that this data comes out. We are talking of more than 600 women, and to understand whether they're victims of human trafficking or if they are in a forced labor situation, we really needed to do it in an efficient way, but yet to make sure that it works, that it's efficient. So for each person, we collect 12 data points. We believe that this is one of
your audio broke up, so I just want to clarify. You said 112.
Yes, 112 data points for each person. So it's not like a survey, or it is like a survey, but it's not a very simple survey. And most of the women are not able to read or write. So we also had to go around that challenge, and we were able to. So we believe that this data set is one of the largest data sets in the Gulf regarding domestic workers, as well as in scope, as well as in depth. The data that we collected, I'm going to speak a little bit more on the next slide, but just to give you a highlight, the information that we gathered from the women, it's all the way from recruitment to repatriation and reintegration that Miriam will speak more about. So we knew everything from before they came to Oman, while they were in Oman, and when they returned. So just for you to understand, it was not a research project per se, because we were on the ground speaking to police officers, speaking to employers, helping them go to immigration offices, to the Ministry of Labor. So we were quite heavily involved for the last 2 years. And of course, after this, we continue to do so. And please, if there is a BBC podcast where also Rima speaks there as well, I invite everyone to listen to it, and you can hear 3 stories directly from the women. So for the next slide, is regarding the methodology. We worked with real-time and near real-time data. And basically what this means is that as we collected this information, we were able to see things as they were happening at that moment. And it allowed us to understand what is it that we need to do, what has to be our response, what are the vulnerabilities of that woman, and what really do we need to do. So it was in real time. Near real time is the situation that has just recently passed. And we were able to collect this. This is very important, especially when it comes to human trafficking, because we want to understand this as it is happening and try to fix the problem right then, rather than collect this information or this data once the victim has returned. We want to do this before. And the source of information was primary, meaning we got this information directly from domestic workers, from their employers, from the recruitment offices, from government officials, basically from everyone that had a stake in this, with this community, in this issue. Secondary sources we did use, but this was mainly for Sierra Leone, because we are not on the ground. Our understanding might be limited, especially when it comes to the actual practices. So we relied also in secondary sources for Sierra Leone. And the framework to understand whether they are victims of human trafficking or forced labor, we used ILO indicators for human trafficking and forced labor, as well as international best standards.
I also want to jump in and just say, so 2 of the other really incredible things is, one, that this was data collected from domestic workers, which is known to be one of the hardest populations to work with, because as we heard in Hawa's story, most of them cannot leave their home. And so thank you to technology, which has allowed us to still hear their stories and collect their stories, which is something that has historically not been able to happen, and not on this scale. So that's something very profound about our work. And then also, as Ekaterina mentioned, the data is real time and near real time, and it's primary, which is a rarity when it comes to human trafficking data, right? Ekaterina, we've talked about how a lot of human trafficking data is estimates.
Exactly. And we wanted to really understand what is the prevalence according to real-time and in real-time data. And we have been fortunate to be able to gather this information. And also just, I think for everybody to know that, as you said, domestic workers are very isolated just because of the nature of the work. So one of the first things we make sure to do is to put them in a community, to make sure they know they are not the only one, that they can speak to other Sierra Leoneans, and to know that whatever she might be going through, she's not alone. So we create these communities to make sure that they know you are part of a bigger community.
If you have questions about the methodology or anything, again, feel free to use this Q&A box, and we'll get to your questions in a bit.
So the report in numbers, just remember each number is one life. I think what is important here to point out is that the report information, whenever you see a percentage, this is based on the nearly 470 verified survey entries. We received more than 600, but we were only able to verify for about 470, as well as the almost 400 in-depth conversations. These conversations lasted all the way from only a few days all the way to more than a year. And during this conversation is when we are able to see the information that we have from that person, from that woman, and know what do we need to ask, what do we need to do. And especially when it came to repatriating somebody, we had to have these conversations. So regarding the findings, the report is quite extensive when it comes to the findings, because we wanted to make sure that we really talk about all of them. On the left side, you can see at a high level the findings, themes that we have seen. Under each topic, there are many subtopics, and you will be able to read in the report in a lot of detail information about this. For example, for the recruitment in Sierra Leone, we know who the recruiter was, how much she paid, where did she get the money, what was she told, how did she travel, why did she travel, and then of course what happened in Oman, and then if we were able, or if she was able to go home, what has happened. So the findings go quite in depth, and we wanted to make sure to share this. One example is the human trafficking indicators. As you can see, they are quite high. 99.8% of the women we identified as victims of human trafficking. We use the human trafficking statistical definition, the PRIF, in order to calculate the prevalence of human trafficking. And then we go under each topic more in depth, about how many women worked every day, how many women had breaks, did they pay recruitment fees, were they allowed to leave the house or not, were they locked, did they have Wi-Fi, were they able to leave the house. As much as you can think of, we had it covered. And also something very important, we monitored when the women would go, let's say, to the police or to the Ministry of Labor to seek support. We wanted to know, is that working? Is it working? And so we also report on what was the women's experience when they would try to reach a grievance mechanism in Oman to seek redress. So I cannot, unfortunately, go through all the findings, but please, do not hesitate to contact us if you want to know more into the background information about this report and the findings.
Yeah, and we'll post a link at the end of the webinar for where you can access the report yourself. And just briefly, these percentages that you see here, the 99.8% of our participants were victims of human trafficking. Again, just sort of grounding us back in Hawa's story, you see so many of the things that she experienced represented there in percentages. Working 7 days a week, paying recruitment fees, being deceived about what you're going to go do in Oman, or even maybe about the country that you're going to. So a lot of similarities in our sister stories. Speaking of our sisters, I want to bring in Sister Miriam now, who works directly with many of these women as she works on reintegration. And we're so grateful to have World Hope International as a partner. We refer women to them when we repatriate them. And so we're so grateful for you, Sister Miriam, and your team for all you do to support these women. And I hand it over to you just to share more about what you found and what you felt when you read this report and how it's relevant to your work.
Hello. So what I want to say is that it was really, I was really grateful for the fact that we have been part of this journey with Do Bold. They started referring case to us because we are the organization who had been working on trafficking issues since 2004. When we started receiving the referrals from Do Bold, like Sari mentioned as she was introducing, said that they didn't know that it was quite a big community of women who are working in Oman. So when we started receiving the referrals, we come to realize that it was much more, not just one or two referrals, but there were a lot of women who needed the support. And for me, it was like, wow, this is what we have been experiencing in our contact with these women, not only in Oman, but Kuwait, Lebanon, and these women all have similar stories. So what was indicated, or the findings from the report, are things that we as an organization, World Hope International, can strongly resonate with. We are happy that a like-minded organization has also been able to do this research, and it's now in black and white. It's evidence-based that indeed these women have experienced exploitation in their pursuit of their dream in Oman. And like I said, we can resonate with it because from their stories, we know that this is what they have experienced. And the powerful part of this survey or this research is that the voices of these women have been captured real times. Their stories or what they have experienced have also come out in this report, and they are very similar. And I listen to these stories all the time. And we have been working effortlessly. And based on this report also, we are going to increase those efforts in platforms, technical working groups, bringing out this information, referring people to this document so that they themselves can read and know that these are things that are actually happening to women. And I am happy to know that immediately there is a result of this report, the minister coming in to want to have an interview with the founder. For me, I find quite thrilling and exciting, knowing that actions will be taken. Yes, we have got to know about what is happening to these women, but what can we do as partners, as donors, so that we can be further able to prevent it by working more with communities on sensitization, making policies to protect these women as they go out, because the reality of unemployment in Sierra Leone is big, and there will always be the temptation for them wanting to go out to other countries to work. How can these women be protected whilst they go on to pursue their dreams? I think these are some of the questions we should be having, and conversations with the players in this field as to how these women should be protected, and also how we can be able to source funds to put in this not only protective but preventive measures to support these women as they go out to work in these other countries, not only Oman, but wherever they might go to pursue their dreams. So I want to say, this is really we partake of the glory and the goodness of this research, because this is what we have been screaming aloud and saying, this is just based on the experience. And now a report is here confirming that this is exactly what these women have experienced. We are working with a lot of women, and like I said, it's big because sometimes it's overwhelming because we have to source the funds. There are many women out there Now that they know that there is support, they are coming out. 2017, women who have gone to the Gulf states to work and have experienced exploitation and still need support. So it's not like we are not just saying they need a one-off support. It's a long walk to recovery, and we have to be there with them to recover and be able to dream again and have aspirations for their lives.
Thank you, Sister Miriam, and thank you for all that you and World Hope do to support these survivors and to the work on prevention as well. You speaking is reminding me of the phrase, now that we know better, we can do better. And you have been saying it from your experience, and now hopefully here with the backing of numbers, statistics, we can prove what you have known innately through your work, and now we can do better, our governments can do better, and we'll get to in just a bit the recommendations that we have to governments. I want to turn to Rima now as well. If you can just, so you're on the Gulf side of things. Sister Miriam has shared the Sierra Leone side. You're on the Gulf side of things. How did this report strike you? How do you feel that it's relevant?
Thanks, sorry. I'm going to check first if you can hear me okay. Okay, fantastic. I mean, I almost don't know where to start because, we've been working with Dubold on this for 2 years. And I remember that moment you were reflecting on when, you first heard of these cases and you realized that the magnitude was going to be sort of far greater than any of us could imagine. And I think it's important to note that, the first thing that I think all of us did was try to reach out to much larger international agencies and organizations to see if they could support, particularly with repatriations. And the response that we got was sort of an unwillingness to intervene, but more than that, an unwillingness to sort of share information. And the sense that, there was definitely an awareness of the situation of Sierra Leonean domestic workers as well as other domestic workers in Oman at that point, particularly because COVID-19 had stranded a lot of domestic workers in Oman. And yet this desire to sort of not share any of that information. And I think, the Do Bold report, which is based off of 10 years of discussions with 2 years of discussions with domestic workers and interventions to support them, really sheds a light on, on this issue that otherwise would not have, received the spotlight. And I think, as sort of Ekaterina and Miriam and you, Sari, have mentioned, this is going to be really critical for holding governments accountable. And I think what we've seen in Oman in particular is that the country tends to fly under the radar. It doesn't receive as many domestic workers as a place like Saudi. It's not quite as wealthy as the UAE. And so there are a couple of reports out there about domestic workers in Oman, most from a few years ago. And the government tends to be very dismissive of its findings, calling them anecdotal. I think it's going to be very difficult to call the Do Bold report anecdotal based on the very strong data that is in the report. And I think, while the report shows that a lot of the issues domestic workers are facing, I think, are not surprising to any of us, and they're the issues that are common throughout the region themselves. It sheds a light on what specifically is happening in Oman and in the Sierra Leonean Oman corridor, which is an emerging migration corridor, right? It's not the same as, say, looking at Filipino migrants going to Saudi, something that's been happening for decades. It is a relatively new migration corridor, and for that reason, it really needs the scrutiny that this report is going to help bring to bear. I will also say that I think one really important thing to point out from the report, which may not be fully apparent, but I think is also a really important learning from the report, is just how difficult it was for this work to be done for so many reasons. One being the financial restrictions in Oman, which make it really difficult to actually fundraise for these issues and to actually find, on the ground volunteers who are sort of willing to take on risks in order to support workers. And also the sort of unwillingness of some international donors to also support this kind of work in the region itself. A lot of the hours that you see in the report our volunteer hours, right? That was, Sari and Ekaterina and the whole team, spending 24/7 talking with women and supporting women. And while there was funding for things like repatriation tickets at some point and, the soft landing kits, there was not funding to support all of the work that the team itself was doing. And I really hope that this report serves as a sort of evidence base for the importance of funding in Oman and in the region overall. One thing, it's almost COVID-19 was almost helpful in this case, in that it was because of the pandemic that we did find a few donors who were willing to support repatriations. But outside of the COVID-19 context, direct support to workers in the region is extremely difficult to obtain. And so I really, really hope that this report shows that, one, there is a need for support to workers who are in country, and two, that there are people who are able to actually execute that support and help people throughout the return journey. A few other things that I think were really important about the report is that it really reflects how processes in countries of destination and in Oman specifically are not designed for domestic workers. And I think we saw this when we tried to, reach out to government officials to sort of alert them of the issues that domestic workers were facing, whether it was with their employers specifically, or whether it was trying to get support in, workers taking advantage of the amnesty. And, what became immediately clear is that nobody really cared. Nobody really cared that the processes were completely inaccessible to domestic workers, that workers couldn't get the credit cards that they needed to pay for their own tickets or to pay for their COVID-19 tests. They couldn't get their identity documentation from their employers. They couldn't fill out the forms in many cases. These were all things that the Dubold team was supporting workers in achieving. And without there being being a space for organizations like Dubold to do this work on the ground, we're only going to continue to see these same issues continue. I don't want to take up too much time. I think the report just does a really good job of highlighting, not only how scant the protections in Oman are, which I think are quite clear when you compare them to the rest of the region. Oman is the only country that does not have a domestic workers law, and that does not incorporate domestic workers into any of its labor law, but worse than that, the few protections that it does have are not guaranteed to workers. So the few rights that they have to being paid on time, to having decent accommodation, to receiving medical care, the Dubold report really shows how none of this is actually being guaranteed by the government, by the Omani government. And I really hope that this can, as Ekaterina has said, this is not the end of the journey. This is just the beginning of it. And now with this sort of incredibly powerful evidence base, it can be used as advocacy, both with the Sierra Leonean government, as well as with the Omani government, as well as with other international stakeholders who are able to hold the government accountable. And I will end it there, just because I think I've been talking for a while, but I wanted to thank Sari and Ekaterina for having me here, and for the incredible work that you guys have been doing over the past couple of years. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rima, and thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. Getting to that point, right, of okay, what should we be doing? We know maybe what's not happening, but what should be happening? Ekaterina, can you talk a little bit about a really important part of this report is the recommendations. There are 23 recommendations that we make because we do believe that this situation can change. This is not hopeless. Tell us a bit about how it can change, what can be done.
Yes, absolutely. It's not hopeless. Otherwise, we would be working we really have high hopes that this is going to change. And before I say anything, I really want to really acknowledge the support of RIMA, migrantrights.org, and Medium, because this is a work that it really takes more than just one organization to make it happen. And really, the work that goes into it is multi-layer, and by doing it by one organization is really, it doesn't accomplish what we have been able to accomplish with the support of migrantrights.org, especially RIMA, and Medium with World Hope International. So I just really want to acknowledge their support for now almost 2 years, at least only with this project. So I will briefly just talk about the recommendations. There are 23 recommendations, both for Oman and for Sierra Leone. And we have divided them a little bit by giving recommendations to the policies that are there, what needs to be changed, what needs to be removed, what needs to be added in to create better policies. But as well, we created recommendations of better practices or regulating practices that should not be there. So we have policy, and then we have the implementation or normalized practices that are nowhere close to being regulated. And we wanted, through the recommendations, close this gap. So the only recommendation I think that I want to focus on is on the recommendation that was provided to both Oman and Sierra Leone. As we speak, we have more than 600 women that we are in touch with, because this is not everyone, that are wanting to go home and are not able to. They had a 1-year amnesty that ended this past January, but not everybody was able to return. So as we speak, this problem is continuing, and we want to address this situation now. What needs to be done to make sure these women return home? Their health is deteriorating, their mental health is deteriorating, as well as they have issues in their home country where relatives have passed away, they're not able to return. So there is such a complexity of issues that we need to understand. And for those that do not know about why is it so difficult to return home, it's because a flight ticket is not enough. The domestic worker needs the permission of the employer to return home, and that's why it's so difficult.
Thanks, Katarina. Yeah, so these are some of our recommendations. We're happy to answer questions more about recommendations or anything else you want to hear about. Feel free to submit your questions. I want to also turn to, though, the relevance of this report beyond governments, right? Beyond the government of Oman and Sierra Leone. How is this report relevant, Ekaterina, to other stakeholders?
Yes, just quickly, I forgot regarding the recommendations. We don't only give the recommendation, but we also provide like a suggested approach on how to implement it. There are many ways that can be implemented, but at least we provide a pathway, a blueprint for governments to take that path and put in place that recommendation.
And I want to mention as well, because it's been in the news a lot recently, not just our report, but other governments, specifically sub-Saharan African governments, being in dialogue with Oman about the conditions of workers there, other Gulf states. Our recommendations, though they're based in data directly from Oman and Sierra Leone in that specific relationship, there is a lot of overlap which other governments can use in implementing these policies. So it's not just that if you're in the government of Oman or Sierra Leone, you should pay attention. No, there's beneficial information here for governments on both sending and receiving countries broadly.
Exactly. It's relevant to both, as you said, receiving and sending countries. So in this report, we're talking about Sierra Leoneans regarding the domestic work sector, and we're talking about Oman. But we believe that there is a relevance to others, such as other organizations that are working in the same field, understanding how large the gap on data is, especially when it comes to human trafficking. We have been able to close that gap, as an example, in this report. So we invite organizations to take a look and see how we have been able to gather data in human trafficking from those that are hardest to reach. For businesses, we know that supply chain audits are not efficient. And we have proven a way that you can monitor supply chains effectively, efficiently, especially when it comes to migrant workers. Investment institutions, domestic work sector has been highly overlooked, but investment institutions need to invest ethically, and to do so, they need to look at the domestic work sector and make sure that they are investing in entities that work in this region to make sure that this is not being further overlooked. And this is at a very high level, the relevance that you can see in the report outside of Sierra Leoneans in Oman as in the domestic work sector.
I'm muted. There we go. Thank you, Ekaterina. So there is broad application to businesses, institutions, governments. What about the 20 of us on this call? Maybe some of us are representing governments, maybe some of us are representing institutions, but what about individuals? What can we do? The reality is that this information needs to be shared widely and broadly to our governments. So send this to your government, send these to any connections you have in relevant authorities who are decision makers, so that these policies can be changed, can be implemented. And as Ekaterina said as well, this is a framework, a methodology that can be applied to other situations. And so if you're with an organization that's in another area of the world, working on another migration corridor, wanting to sort of brainstorm together how to get data that you need, we would love to have a conversation with you. So we'll pop our email address in the chat. Please reach out to us. This is, like we said, just the beginning. It's not the end of anything. So I'm going to turn now to a conversation among our panelists here. And I just want to start off with a question that came in via the chat. I think this was referring to something that Rima mentioned, which is, why is there such resistance of other organizations to assist on these kinds of issues? Rima, that was in response to something you said, so I'll let you speak first.
Yeah, I mean, well, the primary reason when we're talking about international agencies, at least, is that they want to make sure that they can still secure space for them to work in the country. And so that means that there are boundaries to the kind of work that they're able to do. So, we found out at one point that one of the organizations that we approached had actually started to support some of the domestic workers in the country, but were sort of unwilling to ask for funding to help others. And so there's a very delicate relationship between these IGOs and between most of the Gulf countries, where in order for them to have permission to work in the country, they have to not rock the boat too much. And so that's why we saw them, one, not wanting to really be involved in the cases that we brought to them, and two, being unwilling to really speak out about them. And that is really just an extension of, the fact that the government itself doesn't really allow for civil society space to exist at all. And so for these organizations to be there, they've really got to sort of, not be too critical in order to continue some of the work that they do.
What about funders? Why do you think funders are resistant?
Oh, so many reasons. Well, some funders do have sort of financial reasons, investments in the region and things like that, for as to why they don't want to intervene in the Gulf specifically. We also see a lot of people who just think that, the Gulf is a really wealthy country and therefore does not need to be the recipient of any of these funds. But I think with most funders, there is sort of a fear of getting involved in what is a kind of a gray area, right? So technically in most of these countries, you can't really fundraise unless you have permission from authorities. You can't be a registered NGO and receive funds unless you have permission from authorities. And none of the, a lot of the work that that you guys were doing and that we were doing wasn't really straightforward, in terms of, like, we couldn't ever just transfer money to somebody in the country and sort of get the work done. We had to go through a lot of hoops and obstacles in order to get somebody a ticket, in order to get somebody a COVID test. And I think a lot of funders are just a little bit wary of getting involved in that. And then the other thing is, I think, as you and Ekaterina have said, there's actually not that much research to support work in the region. And it's kind of, a double-sided coin. I don't know if that's the right phrase. On the one hand, there's not that much research to support this kind of work in the region. On the other hand, there is a tendency for funders to prefer to support research rather than direct intervention. There tends to be a lot of funding available for workers once they return, but people don't want to get involved when the worker is still stuck in the country. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that definitely does. And that is the situation, right? We have many workers who are stuck. And I think, this is something for our sisters, right? That is incomprehensible. They're like, well, can I just go to the airport? They're asking, can I just go? No, like, can you just get me a ticket? Can I go? No, it's not possible. You can't actually leave the country without your employer's permission. So that word stuck and trapped that we have been using is very much a reality.
And I just want to quickly mention something very important. Like Rima said, we saw how during COVID-19, the response was from funders was amazing to really get the workers out, especially because a lot of them, we know that they were let go and a lot of them were on the street without food, sleeping on the street. And we saw the support that there was. And during the peak times of COVID, despite lockdowns, despite having to do double PCRs, we were able to repatriate. We were able to get the money with migrant rights, through migrant rights, to repatriate the women. But now you can see it has slowed down. The response, the funds are slowing down, despite that nothing has changed on the ground, nothing. The women, and not only in Oman, but in the region, the women continue facing the same issues. They are still on the streets. They still need to go home. Yet the funds have dramatically slowed down, unfortunately.
And we've seen that not only from funders, institutions, but also from individuals who are doing a lot of fundraising during COVID-19, direct peer-to-peer, matching one person with one woman who needed to go home and buying a ticket. And we've had a much harder time even getting those kind of funds since the world has started to open back up.
Yeah,
and question. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, sorry. And I just want to say that this might be very normal because it is hard to understand that unless you are involved in this work, to understand how can someone be in the situation now that COVID is over. So I think it's about bringing awareness that COVID-19, it has been something that has made all the issues come afloat, but it doesn't mean that anything else has changed.
Yeah. We have a question here. For those ladies that were crying to return home, are they still in the same deplorable conditions since you last talked to them? So the answer is, it depends. We have, about 600 women, but for the most case, yes. So we have women who are in situations where they're with their employer and they're facing those 18-hour working days, no day off, physical, verbal, potentially sexual abuse. And then we also have women who have left their employers and who under Omani law are considered criminals. And they're trying to find a way to survive in the country without a legal status. So you can imagine being able to find money for food and for shelter. You heard in one of the audios, somebody who's living on the street. It's a very real struggle day in and day out for these women, both those who are with their employers and those who are not. I don't know if you want to speak any more to that, Ekaterina.
So yes, we have been able to repatriate more than 100 women from this group. I think what we have seen as a change has been more towards the worst. Why we are seeing more women with more mental issues that before we would see, but not as much. And also we are having more women being detained and asking for support. Once they're detained, they need to pay their own ticket back, and they don't have any money. Or so we are receiving at the moment a lot of women that are being detained and want to go back, and women with mental issues. Some of them that unfortunately we cannot help return home because they are detained in a hospital and cannot be return home. So I think this has been the difference that we have seen.
I want to turn to the prevention side of things, because ultimately that's what we want, right? We want to prevent these things from happening in the future. Something that there's been a lot of talk about recently is about travel bans. The government of Liberia has recently called for a ban on workers traveling to Oman. What do we think about those? Are these effective? Do they actually help prevent the problem? I'll let Ekaterina start, since we have a recommendation, I think, specifically about this, and then anyone else can chime in.
I would like actually to hear from Miriam, because she is on the ground. I mean, I can say from the research, we saw the women that we have been in touch with, they came before the ban, during the ban, and after the ban, and there is no difference in what their experiences. But I think I really want to hear from Miriam, because she's on the ground, and I wonder how it is for her to see that from Sierra Leone.
Yes, like you said, based on our experience, there was a ban, I think it was in 2017, there was a ban on domestic workers leaving the country. But I tell you, that did not change anything. What happened is that more illegal agents or recruiters was enhanced, because they started doing or recruiting them underground and taking them not through the airport of Sierra Leone, but through neighboring countries to traffic them out of Sierra Leone. So that did not change anything. It just made the situation worse.
Yeah, and you will see in our report, we have a map that shows the migration route, and people were crossing over, you know, in West Africa, the borders are rather porous, right? Crossing over to Guinea and then leaving out of the Guinea airport to go to Oman. So it didn't help the situation to have a ban. And in fact, it led to more irregular migration, which is then harder to address as well. All right, we're at time. I would invite additional questions if you want. We're happy to also answer questions by email. Hop on a conversation. We really do want to continue this conversation. We are really, really grateful for Sister Miriam and for Rima for being with us. And just want to end with a couple of notes of thanks. I am going to put up some beautiful artwork to show you all, which this artwork is in the report. This is from Sister Hawa Jane Bangura. She is a Sierra Leonean artist, and she agreed to work with us on this report for us to use these images to represent our sisters in Oman. They touch me every time I look at them. I hope that they touch you as well, and I hope you'll read the report. For the three on the right, we actually have assigned each one of these faces to a case study, to a story, and so you can really start to understand our sisters' stories. A little bit of a face with a name, so to speak. I want to thank MigrantRights.org, World Hope International, Fair Square, who is not on our call today, but Fair Square and MigrantRights.org helped with reviews and edits of the report. We want to thank our Dubold team of volunteers, small but mighty, and you know who you are. Thank you for your work and your support. We want to thank the donors who made all of the repatriations possible. Some of you are on this call. We thank you for your support. We thank you for partnering with our sisters to help them go home. And if you are interested in helping to bring a woman home, we are still working on these repatriations. You can go to our website and click on the donate button and select for your funds to be matched with somebody to be repatriated. I promise you, this makes a world of difference in somebody's life. It really is life-changing. And there are hundreds of women who, I have them on my phone in my WhatsApp right now, who are seeking to go home and could use our support. So if you find yourself wanting to get involved more or in a position to do so, we can direct you to our website. I want to close just as we started with the voice of one of our sisters. Music is a very much an encouragement for a lot of our sisters in Oman, and often in our groups they're sharing songs, and we actually produced a music album together with them. And so I want to play you one of the songs from that music album to close out our time. I'm going to let the whole song play. You're welcome to leave at any point as you need to, but this will be the end of our time together, and we'll close with our sister's voice. Thank you for being here.
We need your help, oh God, we need your help. Salon picking, then now Oman, they cry for you help. We've been beaten, molested, and devastated in Oman. Oh God, we cry for your help. Oh my God, oh my God. When shall we see our home, Sierra Leone? When shall we see our beautiful Mama Salon? With a picking day of Sierra Leone, they cry for you help. NGO, OIM, all walks of life. We they call upon you this moment, we need your help. The suffering, the pain, the killing is too much. Oh yes, we need your help. We need your help, now we need your help. We that bear with God Almighty, we need your help. NGO, OIM, all walks of life. Oh Lord, we that cry for your help. We fumble them, we picking them, we sisters them. We left them us alone for confirmed survivor. This thing don't turn to worse, and we no expect and for be. This moment, this day, we they cry. We've been through so many pain, so many difficulties, so many trials, temptation all over this country. We in the streets, place for sleep, we no get time. Team for it, every day we dey cry. We need your help, OIM, we need your help. NGOs, the walks of lives, we are crying for help. International world, oh, we need your help. We the picking them of Sierra Leone, we need your help. We the sick, we the cry, team for itself we no get. We dey na street, helplessly sigh for sleep, self we no get. Every day and night the pain, the molestation is too much. All we need is to go back home. Oh, oh, my game. Oh, oh, my game. When shall we see our home? When shall we see our beautiful Mama Salon? That's all what we need to go back home. We want to go back home. We want to go back home. Our families, our parents, they are crying for us. We'll be molested, devastated, also God. Our Father in heaven, we cry for help.
We need Republic to